Hello, Energonomics viewers. I'm your host, Richa Mishra. The trio of energy, politics, and economics has reached a critical flashpoint in March 2026. Recent escalations in the Middle East, specifically the direct conflict involving Israel, the US, and Iran, that began in late February 2026, have reintroduced a massive geopolitical risk premium into the global market. In this episode of Energonomics, I discuss with Professor Tom Seng of Texas Christian University how intertwined the trio is. Professor Sang, my first question to you is, what is this energy geopolitics nexus which we see today?
Well, I think obviously it's somewhat similar, but on a much larger scale than when Russia invaded Ukraine. People don't seem to understand their dependence, not just on fossil fuels in general, but on specific regions of the world where a lot of fossil fuels like oil and liquefied natural gas are actually produced and exported. And so it unfortunately, it sort of becomes a wake-up call to the supply chain for oil and liquefied natural gas. And as we all know, you can't have economic growth without energy to support that. And so, this is a major shock, I think, on the economic system globally, not to mention specific countries that are producing oil in the region, as well as specific countries like India, like China, who are major importers of crude oil.
So, last couple of days, we've also seen, attack on energy establishments, refineries, and other capacities. I just wanted to understand from you, and if you can elaborate it for our viewers also, that by doing this, what kind of economic ripple effect do we see?
So I think first and foremost, we're looking for an opening of the Strait of Hormuz. There still is a considerable backlog. That particular strait, it's estimated about 20% of the world's oil exports pass through there. But to your point, Richa, once the dust has settled, so to speak, if we can get to a point of a ceasefire and, let's hope actually end the conflict, there has to be a major damage assessment. We hear about attacks and sometimes we get specific information. But Iran, they targeted their neighboring petro states. The United States government said that, gosh, nobody expected that. I think if you understand the region, you certainly could have said that was a possibility. And so an assessment needs to be made because we need to understand the long-term ramifications. If the strait opened up tomorrow, sure, some tankers that have been sitting idle with oil on them, with liquefied natural gas, they'll get to move. But the question becomes, what has happened to oil fields in the area? What has happened to the export facilities? We happen to know for a fact that Qatar's LNG export facility has been damaged. They're estimating about 20% of the production has been halted, and they're saying 3 to 5 years. And then the International Energy Agency in Paris just came out with an estimate yesterday. They've identified at least 40 different infrastructure places that have been hurt. So oil fields, refineries, pipeline systems, and then, of course, the export terminals themselves, not to mention a couple of tankers that have been damaged that are sitting there in the Persian Gulf. So we won't really understand the true impacts of what's going on until we get that assessment. And then we'll know essentially how long is the supply going to be interrupted.
It's this question I asked to almost everyone. Said there's one side you have consumers like India, which see the strain and we understand, and we have been living with supply side and pricing issues for quite a while now. Then you also have countries like US who themselves are producers as well. But are they actually in a comfortable situation right now?
As far as the United States goes, yes, it's we have an interesting paradox in terms of, people throw around these terms about energy independence, energy self-sufficiency. It's not the case, even in the United States. The U.S. again, because of what we refer to as the shale revolution, the horizontal drilling, the hydrofracturing of shale, has opened up a considerable amount of oil and natural gas production in the United States. We currently produce about 14 million barrels a day. So yes, we're the world's largest producer right now of oil, but presently our refineries are consuming about 16 million barrels a day. In the summertime, when there's peak travel, it can be as much as 18 million barrels a day. So we're not covering our own needs. The other thing is the oil that we produce, that the majority of it now comes from these shale plays. It's a lighter oil. You can't refine as many products out of that. Our refineries are set up for heavier oils. So we have a need to import heavier oils. Currently, we get a majority of that. About 60% of what we import comes from Canada. And our neighbors to the north, it comes by pipeline. So that's a secure supply. Given the events that happened with Venezuela, we're also receiving tankers full of Venezuelan crude. That's a heavier crude. So we take these heavier crudes, we blend them with our own. But that puts us in a situation where we are exporting at the same time we are importing. We're exporting some of the lighter oil and we're importing heaviers to blend those. So at the present time, no, we are pretty much insulated. There's price shock. Of course, to be honest with you, in the United States, we complain about gasoline prices. We have no idea, no clue what other countries pay for gasoline. I mean, it's just something we tend to take for granted. So for us right now, it's more about price. It's not about supply interruption. There have been no talks about, what happens if? And we, at the present time, prior to the invasion of Iran, we probably got maybe less than 1 million barrels a day coming out of the Persian Gulf. So on the one hand, yes, the oil and gas industry has kind of put us in a better position. But by the same token, we're not energy independent. We're not energy sufficient. And certainly the global price of oil, I mean, Brent crude this morning, $103 a barrel, that's a marker price for our imports. But no, by no means are we in a situation where we're concerned about supply.
That's very well explained for us because the perception was that US is all too comfortable and rest of the world is in strain, but that's not the reality because the damage, if it is happening to us, it is happening there also economy wide. This leads me to my next question: is like what are the policy and central bank dilemmas that the countries face?
Well, again, as to your point, Richa, this rise in oil has had an immediate impact on economies. Before you even, let's say, got that next barrel of expensive oil, the shock on the stock markets, the shock on commodity markets, everything is tied to oil. And so right now, there are concerns globally. As I said, it's sort of a similar situation to Russia, Ukraine. It's a wake-up call for Europe, mostly at the time, saying, wait a minute, we've been relying on both oil and natural gas coming from Russia. It's, to your point, countries that are importing oil out of the Persian Gulf have to say, well, wait a minute. Number one, we really didn't expect this to happen. Number two, is this something that we can live with in the longer term? A potentially an unstable supply source. I watched what you do in India from time to time. You've had issues where I know, you were importing oil from Russia, and then the U.S. government pressured you, not to do that. And then they're back saying, well, yeah, this is a crisis situation. You should be able to do whatever you need to do. You have a growing economy. China has a growing economy. My understanding is that both China and India have reached out to Iran and basically said, listen, can you let our oil tankers come through? It's vital to our economy. And so I don't think there's a country really on the planet who isn't impacted by this. If you just look at the financial institutions, how many countries that produce oil rely heavily on that revenue, and they're indebted? They're borrowing money for different things. So again, I think that this is a certainly we could talk about a regional crisis. This is a global crisis on the economic front.
So clearly, it is situations like this is just not challenge for us. It is challenge for everyone. And do we will we be wrong in saying that what we have been seeing for last few years has been war over energy?
I have to agree with you. I do. A lot of people don't see it that way. But at the end of the day, I 100% agree with you. If you get right down to it, that's what it is. If you control energy sources, as we're seeing today, right, you impact the global market. On the one hand, that the desire to control energy is, sort of selfish, meaning I want to make sure I have enough to run my economy, keep my citizens happy. But by the same token, it's also the more I control, the more influence I do have on global markets that are dependent on these sources of energy. There's been no two ways about it. The Venezuelan situation was about oil, plain and simple. I know that the current administration of the United States, their ultimate goal, if they could, would be to take over Iran and control the oil. That's just, as the United States citizen, I'm saying, yeah, I think that ultimately that could be, would be a motivation. It's not going to happen. But, we have a president who on his very first day in office, in his first term, stood in the halls of the CIA and kind of said, hey, when we went into Iraq, we should have kept the oil. So there's sort of, I think there's that thing where you see oil as wealth, which is what it is. And so, yes, I think at the end of the day, it becomes controlling oil, controlling the supply chain for oil, because that's a type of power that's different than military, but just as impactful because of its economic results.
So, a supplement question I had was that situation like this, countries now talk about trading in their own currency as well. Till now, it was all about petrodollar. So, do we see, the countries, the economies moving away from petrodollar?
I think that it's something that they will have to strongly consider. I know Saudi Arabia in particular has talked about it for years. The Chinese would like to get on the yuan. They're looking at trading oil in the yuan, basically in their exchanges. So I think every time we have a situation like this, to your point, Richa, people have to rethink what they've been doing. There will be a longer term impact because of this crisis. And it will be things like maybe some countries will even ramp up more alternative renewables than they currently are, or put more of a focus, more of an investment there. And then also look at, okay, you have to now do the what if. What if this happens again? Because this was an actual conflict, an actual attack by Israel and the United States on an oil producing region. So you have to say, well, wait a minute, what if this happens again? Because in the past, we would just see, so for instance, the conflicts between Israel and Hamas and the Houthi rebels, it would spike prices. Israel's not a big producer of oil, but the idea was, wait a minute, this is a region where a lot of oil is produced, and any conflict in there that threatens that supply threatens the world. And now we're seeing the actual impacts of a major conflict in an oil producing region. And as we spoke about earlier, what are the long-term impacts? Well, it's going to take a while for us to make an assessment of the duration of the damage and how long to get this whole region back to exporting at the levels they were exporting before. So yeah, I'd have to say, and again, looking at both China and India, with the economic growth that you have, you can't be without energy, absolutely positively. And so again, you all know what you need to do, but I'm sure your government is going to be looking and saying, well, wait a minute, what other sources do we have? Where are the reliable sources of energy that we believe we'd be comfortable with that in the long term is a partner or multiple partners to assure that even in situations like this, they can continue to feed you the energy you need to grow your economy. I see India as China, let's say 10 years ago. And your economic growth has been outstanding and you may surpass China in the next few years. But it's, I understand that is very key for your country.
So, to sum up, if I want to sum up our conversation, what we are actually understanding is that before any of the so called mighty powerhouses decide to do something like this, also do remember that it's going to impact you as well. It's not only the others who are getting impacted, but your economy will also get impacted. The other side would also be that we could see trade in other currencies as well, because every country wants to protect and ensure its own energy security, the word which is used most commonly. Am I right?
I agree. Yes, I agree. Yeah, this is again, unfortunately, it's one of these major dynamic shifts that impacts the globe, and every single party is going to have to step back and say, "Well, wait a minute. We knew this could happen. We didn't think it would, and we can't afford to have this happen again. So, what steps can we take to move away from this?" If you look at, for instance, the EU is a good example of, since Russia Ukraine, they've been slowly but surely weaning off of all Russian energy in general. They've ramped up their alternative in renewables, even though, that's a controversial topic within the EU itself. They've also sort of pushed back their goals of zero in 2050 because something happened that sort of was a wake up call. And they said, we need to rethink our own energy policy moving forward. And again, it reaches sort of to what you and I are talking about. Each country is going to have to look out for themselves. What is best for our country? And yes, it would have been nice if the United States had consulted other countries instead of just Israel to kind of say, hey, brace yourselves. Here's what's coming.
So, one last question before we wrap up is, how does the world now see India's diplomatic positioning in this current conflict?
I can't speak, honestly, can't speak for how the world looks at India. I just, as an observer of energy markets and global economies, I very much thought, it was great when your prime minister had said, we're going to buy energy from anybody, meaning you have to look out for your country first. Yes, if the United States says, well, hey, we'd really love you to stop buying oil from Russia. Okay, well then, United States, show India what they can do instead of. And I think that's going to be the way. The Chinese are looking out for their economy. I mean, they reached out to Iran and said, listen, we need to have tankers moving through. And I would think they've got some pretty good leverage with Iran. But yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be every country for themselves. You're going to have to look out for what is best for you. I mean, as you and I spoke about earlier, the United States, we're in this conflict with Israel. We are insulated. Price shocks, yes. But relatively speaking, on a global scale, what we're paying for gasoline doesn't even compare. But it is a price shock. It hurts our economy. But we're not worried about supply interruption. No one has said anything about rationing gasoline or any of those things that we've seen in the past when oil supply has been cut off. So yes, I just think it's going to be every country steps back and says, well, wait a minute. What is most important to us? How do we move forward in the event that something like this happens again?
So, to conclude, it has actually exposed that each country has to fend for himself or herself, take care of its own economy first, and then the rest follows.
I agree.
Thank you so much for sparing this time with us, despite being in a very different time zone. So we're very grateful to you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. And best of luck to the country of India and your people.
Thank you. This is all we have in this episode of Energonomics. Till we meet again. For the first-time listeners, Energonomics is a podcast and video series which focuses on decoding the complexities of the energy sector. We try to examine how geopolitics, government policies, and economic shifts impact energy prices and security. Through the episode, we try to dissect and demystify the issues which have a direct impact on you and I.